Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature Underground. Upon further reflection, my name is Hunter Lanier, and I'm here today with yet another review of an upcoming movie. This time it is the highly anticipated Marty Supreme, written and directed by Josh Safdie, but also co-written by, let's not forget, Ronald Bronstein, who has written, edited, and produced, I believe, all of the Safdie brothers movies, except for, perhaps notably, The Smashing Machine, which also came out this year, and was entirely directed, written, edited by Benny Safdie. Speaking of The Smashing Machine, let's start there. Coming off of the success of Uncut Gems, both brothers went their separate ways. With The Smashing Machine, it felt like Benny Safdie was trying to do something different. With Marty Supreme, it feels like Josh Safdie felt like there was a lot of unexplored territory in the style that we have come to associate with the Safdie brothers. In other words, Marty Supreme feels much more like a direct successor to Uncut Gems. And when I talk about what we have come to expect from the Safdie brothers, I'm talking about the manic tempo, the volatile protagonists, the rolling downhill story structure. All of this is very much present in Marty Supreme and in full effect. Now, what's also interesting is that in both The Smashing Machine and Marty Supreme, you can see where they're very much aligned. You have eccentric casting, you have moody synths, you have an interest in sports, and of course you have that sort of exaggerated realism. But again, if you were disappointed with The Smashing Machine, which you could have been disappointed for a variety of reasons, but if you were disappointed with that movie and would prefer the Safdie brothers to stay in their fast lane, so to speak, Marty Supreme is very much what you're looking for. It is very much a successor to Uncut Gems in that it retains much of what made that movie great. I think it falls short a little bit in terms of trying to replicate that very intense sense of desperation that Uncut Gems had. But it does some other things too, where it adds an extra layer of accessibility. And I don't necessarily use that word this time as a pejorative, but we'll talk about that later. I think the best way to describe Marty Supreme is that it is no and the movie. If you don't know, I'm referring to the improv concept of yes and, which is the idea that you're always supposed to go along with what your improv partner presents to you as reality. So if your improv partner says that there is a bear wearing a tuxedo behind you, there is a bear wearing a tuxedo behind you. The yes being you're accepting this reality, and the and meaning you're rolling with it. In Marty Supreme, the film is no and all the way down, by which I mean it's as if Safdie and Bronstein are actively writing against themselves the entire time, both for perhaps their amusement as writers to see if they can get themselves out of their own predicaments, but also for the enjoyment of the crowd in watching them try to figure out ways, and ergo Marty try to find out a way out of these situations. The film, and in turn Marty, who is played by Timothée Chalamet, it's almost like he's stuck in this cycle of he gets put in a predicament, a way out presents itself, and then the solution is pulled away from him at the last second. And then the writers, ergo Marty, is forced down a new path. They write themselves into a corner over and over again, continuously banking on necessity being the mother of invention. Watching the film is almost like watching someone play tic-tac-toe against themselves. Now, I realize that sounds terribly boring and totally disparaging, and Marty Supreme is anything but boring. The film's sharp turns are far more exciting than someone drawing a circle into a square. And I love the movie's episodic structure. It doesn't put itself into a plot box. But the film's predictable rhythm, this rhythm of the problem, solution gets pulled away, new problem, new solution gets pulled away, new problem, new solution. This predictable rhythm, it prevents the movie from really ever feeling as wild and free as it thinks it is. All that said, this no-and routine actually has a shockingly emotional payoff. That of all the twists, of all the really sharp turns the story makes, it is the one that I least saw coming. And it's the one that is most benefited from sneaking up on you. I mentioned eccentric casting earlier, and that is something that deserves much more than just a casual aside. The casting is one of the best, the very best parts of this movie. And if you've watched, the other Safdie brothers movies, you kind of know what I'm talking about. When you're watching the opening credits of this film, each successive name seems farther out of left field than the last one. They're the sort of names you would expect to see announced at the beginning of an episode of Hollywood Squares, not a prestigious Oscar contender. Yes, you have Timothée Chalamet and Gwyneth Paltrow as the two big names that you can put on the poster, and you can have them go on the Today Show and all those stupid press junket things. But the heart of this movie, the beating heart of this movie, is the supporting characters. What are the chances we would ever have a cast, much less a cast of a major motion picture, that included Penn Jillette, Abel Ferrara, Fran Drescher, Ratso Sloman, Sandra Bernhardt, and the guy from Shark Tank? And what's even more crazy is that the guy from Shark Tank is exceptional. He's exceptional. He is exceptional in a role that has a lot of narrative responsibility. This isn't Willie Nelson making a glorified cameo in Thief where he's using just his natural likability. This is someone who's kind of playing a role that they probably are very familiar with, whether they themselves are that person or have a piece of that person, or they've known people like this. But it's just a very weird thing to see basically a reality TV person like a Donald Trump, basically a rich guy that's on reality TV, hold his own with a very meaty role with big time actors. There's a moment in the film, a pivotal moment, when he says to another character, "I was born in 1601. I'm a vampire." He says this with such conviction that it makes it the definitive line in the film. I'm not saying he outclasses Timothée Chalamet, which, he doesn't. Chalamet has so much more to do in this movie. But he does edge him out in having the movie's definitive line. In a world where the Oscars are actually a benchmark of quality, I wouldn't hate Kevin O'Leary getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I even noticed David Mamet in the movie. David Mamet is in this movie. I heard there's a play within this film, and I heard the voice of the director of the play, and I was like, that sounds like David Mamet, and it was. Which is funny because this is the second movie in the last few years where I've just randomly heard David Mamet's voice. The other being Beau Was Afraid. And I saw the guy, the hobo with the voice that went viral like 10 years ago. That guy's in this movie. But beyond these people that you inexplicably recognize, there's so many this movie is populated liberally with these amazing little character actors with these small roles, but they add so much flavor. And these aren't character actors like Paul Giamatti or Steve Buscemi. These are true character actors. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this person before, but they seem so real and like they live in this world. They add such authenticity. There's this guy, I just looked up his name, Luke Manley, who plays Marty's like best buddy, who Marty kind of takes advantage of, but he really loves Marty and he likes having a role in Marty's life, a supporting role. He's so good. There's this kind of Weasley looking guy that Marty works with, who's also so good. So the casting in this movie is really just impeccable. Easily the best. I don't know if this is my favorite movie of the year. I don't think it is, but this is the best cast of the entire year of any movie I've seen by a mile. And all of this got me thinking, it really got me thinking, and I thought this before, but why are we paying actors so much money? Movie stars are no longer a draw. All of these movies are bombing at the box office with your Glenn Powells and your Sydney Sweeneys, these people that are supposedly the star, like the big popular people. No one really cares. You know, people will look at you for free on social media, but they're not going to pay $15 and get in their car and drive to a theater to see you. They don't care about you that much, apparently. So movie stars aren't a draw like they used to be, or we just maybe don't have them anymore. I don't know. But either way, they're not a draw. You can extract amazing performances from just regular people, non-movie stars. So with all this talk of movies, of budgets ballooning up to the point where they can no longer be profitable at the box office, let's start with flushing out all of these actors asking for tens of millions of dollars. They've priced themselves out of the market. Now, that doesn't mean that casting non-actors always works out. In fact, I would like to bring up again, and I hate to pick on it because I did like the movie, The Smashing Machine, because Benny Safdie, like his brother, uses that creative casting, but in his case this time with much less success, particularly in regard to the casting of MMA fighter and total non-actor Ryan Bader in one of the movie's 3 lead roles. Where Kevin O'Leary excelled and rose to the occasion, Ryan Bader did not. And he ended up really largely spoiling the love triangle that was central to that movie working. Now, while we're talking about actors, let's go ahead and talk about Timothée Chalamet. Word on the street is that he is on his way to winning an Oscar for this performance. And I have been critical of Chalamet before. I think he is largely, in some of his biggest, most popular roles, he has been extremely wooden. I'm talking about Dune, The King, A Complete Unknown. But this is the best performance Chalamet has given since Call Me By Your Name. Marty Supreme is a loud and showy role, and I get the feeling that is more of Chalamet's speed than the quiet enigma of Bob Dylan, for example. My guess is that those other films all casted him because he was the new it guy, not because he was right for the role. But that is not the case here. Safdie casted this movie with such precision, and Chalamet is part of that. The fact that Chalamet is the it guy is just extra press. Now, I said earlier that Marty Supreme feels very much like a successor to Uncut Gems, and that is very much true. Where it is different is that you do get the sense that Safdie was trying to write a movie, and Bronstein, they were trying to write a movie that would extend, unlike Uncut Gems perhaps, extend beyond the Letterboxd crowd and into your aunt and uncle's Sunday afternoon. I say this because even though Marty Supreme contains all of that Safdie craziness that you would expect and hope for, all of that is sandwiched between the white bread of a traditional sports movie. The titular character here is a ping-pong player, and his whole thing is that he is trying to win this tournament, and he has an Apollo Creed-esque rival, and it's all stuff that is familiar. Now, aside from the novelty of the Safdie insanity and this very not insane sports formula, aside from them coexisting in this way and the novelty of that, it didn't really add or subtract anything from the movie to me, but it does ground the movie in a more relatable context than watching a degenerate gambler try to get rich. Again, it's funny that both brothers went their separate ways, but then both made movies that attempt to subvert the sports genre, both subvert and indulge in the sports genre, but in very different ways. And I was also thinking about One Battle After Another, which seemed to be also a case this year of an auteur director seemingly going out of his way to try to write something that would be more mainstream, if only slightly. But let me reiterate that none of this attempt to perhaps reach a new audience, none of that erases the Safdie weirdo spirit. That is very much intact here. This is a hard movie to watch with a straight face, whether you're laughing, cringing, dry heaving. Even though its rhythm does become predictable after a while, you never know how Safdie and Bronstein are going to write themselves into and out of the next hole. And that's where much of the movie's energy comes from. I do want to bring up, before I slip into the outro, I do want to bring up one little tiny issue that I had. I bet this is going to be something that no one else cares about, this is, again, something that I briefly mentioned. This movie uses a lot of synthy 80s music, and then also perhaps just music that sounds 80s-ish. I am not a fan of that. And then on top of that, it's like the movie takes place in the 50s, so you have all that like rock and roll and the jazz, and you're choosing Tears for Fears? There is also an entire sequence in this movie where the sound mixing is off. I don't really know what the whole thing with that is. I'm sure Safdie has been asked about it, and he might have an answer. It was the type of thing, it was so weird. It's one of those things where I didn't know if something was wrong with the theater. I even saw the theater manager get up and go talk to someone. But then the sound mixing writes itself as soon as that sequence is over. Or that little episode. So it had to be intentional, I think. Maybe it's a Christopher Nolan homage. I don't know. Well, those are all my thoughts on Marty Supreme. Now is the time for you to let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. This is one of my favorite movies of the year. I think it'll be on my top 10 list, which will be coming soon. Next up, I have been sent many movies because this is award season, so I am drowning in movies. I don't have enough time to watch them all. I did, however, just watch Be Gone's new movie, Resurrection. If you don't know Be Gone, he is I think the most exciting director in Asia right now. He is a Chinese fellow. His last movie was Long Day's Journey into Night, which is one of the best movies I've seen this century. So in this movie, I think I might actually watch it again tomorrow because it's a lot of movie. But I look forward to doing that review. I think I'll do that one next. Until then, I leave you with the inescapable truth. Those few simple words, greater than the sum of their parts, that every day underground is a good day.